Episode 1. Role of primary caregivers in early attachment injuries. The majority of emotional injuries sustained by children who fail to form secure attachments occur under the care of primary caregivers. During the critical early years of life, a child's relationship with their primary caregivers shapes their ability to trust, regulate emotions, and build meaningful connections. When the primary caregivers are neglectful, abusive, or inconsistent in providing care, the consequences for the child's psychological development are profound and far-reaching. Attachment theory and early development. John Bowlby's seminal work on attachment theory underscores the critical role of a secure attachment figure, usually the mother, in a child's emotional and psychological growth. When this attachment is disrupted through neglect, abuse, or inconsistency, the child develops an insecure attachment style, which can lead to difficulties in self-regulation, relationships, and mental health. A 2020 review in developmental psychology found that insecure attachment styles in childhood, particularly those caused by parental neglect, were strongly correlated with higher rates of anxiety, depression, and relationship issues in adulthood. Critical window for brain development. Early childhood is a sensitive period for brain development, particularly in areas like the limbic system, which governs emotional regulation, and the prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and impulse control. Parental neglect or abuse during this period can lead to structural and functional impairments. A study in Nature Neuroscience, 2018, found that children who experienced neglect exhibited reduced gray matter volume in brain regions associated with emotion and social processing, leading to long-term deficits. Disrupted emotional regulation. Consistent, responsive caregiving from caregivers helps children develop the ability to regulate their emotions. When the primary caregivers are inconsistent, unavailable, or abusive, children struggle to manage their feelings, often resorting to maladaptive coping mechanisms such as withdrawal, aggression, or loss of emotional control. Case study example. Children raised in environments where primary caregivers, usually mothers, were emotionally unavailable, displayed higher rates of externalizing behaviors such as aggression and internalizing behaviors such as anxiety, according to a longitudinal study published in Child Development. Parental neglect and internal working models. Bowlby's concept of internal working models explains how children develop expectations about relationships based on their early interactions with caregivers. Parental neglect leads to distorted internal models where the child perceives relationships as unsafe or untrustworthy, affecting their ability to form healthy connections later in life. High-profile cases of neglect. Studies of children raised in orphanages or foster care systems have highlighted the devastating effects of parental neglect. These children often struggle with attachment disorders, emotional dysregulation, and an inability to trust caregivers, even when placed in supportive environments later in life. Generational impact of neglect. Families with a history of parental neglect often see these patterns repeated across generations. Parents who were themselves neglected as children are more likely to struggle with providing consistent care for their own children. Consequences of early attachment injuries. Insecure attachments in adulthood. Insecure attachment styles, such as avoidant, anxious, or disorganized styles, lead to difficulties in maintaining healthy relationships and managing stress. Adults with these attachment styles often report feelings of inadequacy, distrust, and fear of intimacy. Mental health disorders. Studies show that early parental neglect increases the risk of mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and personality disorders. Example, a 2019 meta-analysis published in The Lancet Psychiatry found a strong link between childhood emotional neglect and adult depression. Maladaptive coping mechanisms. Children who experience physical and emotional abandonment, neglect, or abuse may develop harmful coping strategies, such as substance abuse, self-harm, or aggression, as they struggle to process their unresolved emotional pain. Conclusion: Addressing the invisible wounds. The role of primary caregivers in early attachment injuries cannot be overstated. Recognizing and addressing these wounds is essential for healing, both on an individual and societal level. By understanding the profound impact of childhood neglect and abuse, individuals can begin the journey toward rebuilding trust, emotional regulation, and meaningful relationships. Society, too, must prioritize early intervention and support for at-risk families to prevent these injuries from perpetuating across generations.